Hey guys, it's Doodly Squatch here, coming at you with a new video, and yeah, story time, I guess, or I don't know, hard to describe. Anywho, here we go. So, much like this video, or at least in this drawing, sometimes you start out on things you don't like and you skip them. Recently, my daughter and I were talking about the idea of happy and kind of what my thoughts are on that. She and I are very similar. We have very I don't know, our the way we deal with things is very similar, and the way our brains are wired, I should say, are quite similar. I have major depressive disorder, and anxiety, generalized anxiety, and I've known I've had that for a good while now. I've been medicated for better part of, I'd say, like 15 years. It's hard to remember. I'd have to ask my cousin, actually. Oddly enough, it was talking with him after he told me about his struggles and that he was on medication, and him opening up to me really made me sort of look at myself and where I was and how I felt, and helped me realize it's like, yeah, things have been off. I'm sad a lot, or just the absence of happy, and so I've had a lot of time to think about that, and a lot of time helping my kids through those sort of thoughts and feelings, and it's certainly been interesting. But the conversation my daughter and I had, I was talking about how the expectation of being happy all the time is a fairly unrealistic one. That I don't think we're built to be happy all the time, honestly. Just from my experience, where happy is kind of these great heights of emotion, and oh, I'm so happy, and I'd say I would rather be content than be happy, or at least I accept that I can be content and sometimes happy. I think that's probably the better way to put it. And I described to her, I'm like, if my emotional state were a graph or some kind of thing, the very middle of the graph, I would call that meh. I'm good. I'm not great. I'm not awful. I'm right in the middle, just meh. And I think most of us kind of coast around meh. And I would say my goal is to bounce above meh and continue to bounce off it and up it, where trying to avoid dips down into the dumps, the blues, that sort of thing, to the degree that you have control over, and moments of great happiness, they come, and for me those are kind of the peaks of the valleys, and there's something to aspire to, but to realize they're an accomplishment and not the norm. And for example, I was telling her, it's like moments of great happiness, I can count them out fairly easily, because there's not a ton of them. Or just honestly just being in the moment, being able to appreciate the moment, is a different one for sure. I was telling her, sitting, I was laying on the couch in the front room, and she was sitting in a chair practicing her cello, and I've always enjoyed music, and our rabbit Chonkers, he's a big boy, he was on the couch cushion behind her in a ray of sunlight, falling asleep to her playing the cello, and me in a half dazed kind of, I wasn't feeling super that day, health wise, so I was already kind of out of it, but in that moment I was very happy. And I was telling her, I'm like, that moment right there was pure joy. I loved it. It was great. Gives me goosebumps thinking about it. And she's like, really? I'm like, really? Happy doesn't need to be, chariots and cakes and fireworks. It can be, little things, little happy things. And I'm sure using the word happy a lot, but it's hard to, positive experience, I guess. And so she was surprised by that, and it was kind of fun to share that with her. And then talking about, sad moments and, things that make us sad. And I think, I tell her a lot of times, sadness comes from unmet expectations. And so, if you have grand expectations for something and those expectations aren't met, then you're going to be sad. And I think we experience that, a lot as artists. I think oftentimes we have a very sort of lavish view of what we want to create. And when it doesn't turn out, it bums us out. And it's, I think for myself, my experience, I try to limit my expectations. Oftentimes my best works come from, when I'm creating for someone, when I'm doing a commission or it's someone's birthday or something like that. And I'm trying to make something nice for them. And a lot of times that just happens organically. The work just turns out better. It's not like I'm putting in extra effort, but it's purpose driven. And for me, oftentimes I don't have a lot of purpose. Look at me. I'm drawing a fetus in a jar, running a robot. That was not what I set out to draw when I sat down. You saw that brief sketch at the beginning. I was thinking, big face, something. I don't know, but here we are. But I would say it's because I go into most of these drawing sessions without a thought in my head and with not a lot of expectation. So when it does strike me, when something comes to me, I'm often tickled. I giggled plenty drawing this because just the idea of this little baby controlling this big robot. And a recurring theme in my drawings you'll find is there's usually one big arm, often robotic, but one big arm. That's I love just asymmetrical characters. Somebody that looks unbalanced. How's this guy? How are those legs going to get around with that big arm? Who knows? I certainly don't. It'd be fun to see someone attempt to animate it. It brings to mind I had a character that I used to draw a lot on a whiteboard at work. He was a butler, this little stubby butler, and he had this massive robot arm, and it was usually holding up a platter of something, or something butlers would do. And the way I pictured him getting around was like thumping with the one hand like Donkey Kong and just sort of launching himself in directions. And so, just, big armed butler. Never gave him a name. No idea. But I think that was probably the genesis of a lot of these big armed guys that I draw now. But finding joy in what you do is always a good thing. And it doesn't have to be, like I said, it doesn't have to be huge, earth-shattering things. Happy can be, small and sweet and short-lived even. Vacations are happy, and in comparison to the rest of the year, they represent a small percentage of it. But people enjoy those. Weekends are happy. Shoot, having something to look forward to every day is always a plus, I would say. At least for me in kind of my mental health journey, trying to have something to look forward to always benefits me. I've referenced my past dental woes in the last couple videos, and they have not ended yet. So I certainly have something to look forward to with that, but it has certainly presented a mighty stumbling block for myself. It's been hard to not be anxious and angry about it. Just when I think everything's done, something else comes up. That's just how it is. But I don't let it get me down too much, and I am blessed to have an understanding family that's very kind to me, and they know if I need some alone time in my office, or if I'm just overstimulated, they know I know that I can tell them that and excuse myself, which is always nice. Good to have a good support system around you, and never be ashamed to talk about your own struggles, your mental health, that sort of thing. Because harkening back to the start of this, had my cousin not told me about what he was doing, I probably wouldn't have looked into whatever kind of looked into treatment or something to help me with my mental health, probably for another few years after that. So I'm super glad he talked to me about it, because otherwise it wouldn't have happened. It would something else would have had to push me over that edge, and it probably wouldn't have been awesome. It probably would have been something sad and catastrophic. But yeah, thanks for listening. I hope this is helpful. I don't know. A big part of this when I started YouTubing is I just wanted to kind of gab, just talk about whatever. I always have stories or just things on my mind, and so let's give it a swing. If you have questions, suggestions of what I should draw, or topics you want me to talk about, I'm an open book. I love talking about stuff. That's just me. I've always been a chatty boy. So anyway, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, do all those fun things, make YouTube love me, but that's not why I'm here. So appreciate you guys. Thanks.